so many sales reps actually kill their deal before they even get to the pitch. They certainly don't mean to, and they have no idea they're doing it. I certainly didn't know what I was doing, but here's what happens. We get on a discovery call. We're excited. We start asking questions, but they're the wrong questions. These are questions that make buyers defensive. These are questions that put us in the position of convincing them. These are questions that basically invite that pushback of, hey, let me think about it and get back to you. And I see this constantly with AEs I coach. So if this is happening to you, you're definitely not alone. The folks I coach, many times they might be working 60 hours a week and they might be pretty close to the top of the leaderboard, but it's taking them too long. They're doing so much activity and they're ending up with a 24% close rate, which is decent, which is respectable, but it's not going to keep you at the top of the leaderboard, which is certainly where you want to be. When that happens and we record their calls, so often what we see is they're asking questions that sound really good, but they actually end up working against them. So I'm Kristen, and I went from teaching 7th graders to closing 7-figure deals in multiple different tech companies. Now remember, before tech, I was in a classroom teaching middle schoolers. So I definitely understand the difference between questions that just get people to smile and nod while they're bored versus questions that get people to perk up and that actually change the conversation. So here's what I've discovered after 13 plus years in sales. The right 4 questions can completely change a conversation. So today we're going to walk through those 4 sales questions that can help boost your closing rate. And it's not because they're clever or manipulative. It's because they help our buyers see what they can't see on their own. So the 4 questions are the business impact question, the personal stakes question, the timeline reality question, and the decision confidence question. I'm going to show you exactly when to use each one. We're also going to talk about why they work from psychology standpoint, and then how to deliver them so they land without sounding scripted or weird. So by the end of this video, you'll have a really simple framework you can use on your next call. So let's jump into it. Question 1 is the business impact question. And here's the concept behind what we're doing here. The underlying question is, hey, walk me through what happens to the business if this problem doesn't get solved in the next 6 to 12 months. Here's why this works. Most discovery questions focus on the problem. They focus on what's broken, what's not working, what's frustrating. But problems without consequences do not create urgency. Everyone has problems they live with all the time. I guarantee you there's something in your house or apartment, your car, your personal life it's irritating, it's a problem, but it's not anything urgent. Our buyers are the same way. This question forces our buyers to connect the dots between their current pain and the actual cost of them staying stuck in that pain. And the best part is when we ask this, we are not telling the buyer the problem is urgent. We are getting them to tell themselves. That's the difference between us pushing and them pulling. When to use this? We use this after buyers have already described their problem, but we haven't pitched anything yet. We need them emotionally invested in solving this problem before we ever position our solution. If we skip this step, you certainly can, but if you skip it, the pitch is going to sound like you're convincing them they have a problem, and no one likes being told they have a problem. Everyone likes a sounding board. Everyone likes being able to talk through a problem they know they have. All right, so here's how this sounds in real life. Let's say you're talking to a VP of HR, as I did for many years selling tech to school district HR teams. They mentioned that their team is struggling with a lack of visibility in the candidate hiring process. We don't jump right ahead to the solution. Instead, we ask something that sounds like this. Okay, so if this visibility issue with candidates continues for the next 6 months, what does that mean for the business? Like, what actually happens? Okay, that gets them to paint the picture, not us. They're saying what happens. We are not telling them. We're not shaking a finger at them. Number 2 is the personal stakes question. And here's the concept behind the question. What we're really asking is, how does this impact you personally? Here's why this works. Business problems are logical, but personal consequences are emotional. And here's the truth. You've heard it before. It's always true. People buy on emotions and then justify with logic. This is even true in business decisions. If we only understand the business problem, we only understand at best half of the equation. This question helps us uncover the real drivers behind a deal. Maybe they have an executive breathing down their neck. Maybe they're worried about losing their best candidates in a disjointed process. This was a huge issue when I sold to HR teams, especially because I was selling to school districts. They compete heavily for the best candidates. As you can imagine, not a lot of people beating down the doors of school districts for jobs, especially after COVID. So if they have candidates that get frustrated with the process, or if another district or another organization moves them through that hiring process faster, the HR team loses a bunch of great candidates and then has to explain that to the other leaders in the organization. It doesn't make them look great. Maybe the team is simply tired from fighting fires all the time, and that keeps them from doing the strategic work that they were brought in to do. Here's when to use the question. We use it after we've established the business impact. We've already made it safe to talk about the problem, and now we're going a level deeper. This is a trust moment. If we ask it too early, it feels invasive. But if we've built the right foundation, this question feels like genuine curiosity. Here's how it can sound in real life. You've just heard them explain how this pipeline visibility or chaos is affecting the business. Now we pause and lean in slightly and say, yeah, I'm curious how this is affecting your day-to-day. Like, what does this actually mean for your week? Watch what happens. They will shift from talking in general business terms and start talking about their reality. You will start to hear emotional words like frustrated, irritating, painful. These are the words we're listening for. That's when the real conversation starts. Question 3 is the timeline reality question. Here's the concept behind the question. What's driving the timeline on solving this, right? Like, why now versus 6 months from now? Here's where this works. This separates real urgency from fake urgency. So buyers can say something like, oh, well, we need this yesterday, or we really need to make a decision. That doesn't mean anything. We need to understand what's actually forcing the decision. What do I mean by that? Is there a board meeting coming up? Is there a new fiscal year starting? Do they have a competitor that's making moves? Is there an executive mandate to get it done by X amount of time or within X quarter? Without a real external driver, something that matters to the buyer, deals slip. Doesn't matter about our discounts. It has to matter to them. This is the question that helps us determine whether we are working a real opportunity. In other words, something that's not just a problem, it is a priority. If not, we're just spinning our wheels on something that's a nice to have and might happen eventually, but most likely not. When to use this? We want to use this in the middle of our discovery conversation. It's like after we've uncovered the problem and the personal impact, but before we start talking about solutions. This is the reality check question. If they can't give us a clear answer here, we might be talking with someone who is exploring but not buying. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be talking to them, but we handle them differently and we forecast it differently than if it was a real deal with real urgency. This is how this can sound in real life. They told us the project is urgent. They've told us why. Now we ask, okay, got it. So help me understand what's forcing the decision right now. Like, what changes in the business if the team waits another 3 to 6 months to address this? And if they give us a vague answer here, that's our cue to probe a little bit deeper. So we can say something like, hey, just cards face up because I've heard this from customers I've worked with before. Sometimes this is like a need to solve right now problem, and sometimes this is a nice to solve eventually problem. Scale of 1 to 10 on how urgent it is to get this done. Just realistically, where does this fall? Because I never want to be the one to chase anything. That may sound like a bold question, but customers respect it. It gives them the opportunity to say what they're really thinking because we've made it okay to do that. Question 4 is the decision confidence question. So here's the concept. Again, scale of 1 to 10 kind of vibe. Scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that if we can solve X, you'll move forward? And if it's not a 10, what would need to happen to make it a 10? Why this works? It does 2 things. First, it tells you where you actually stand. If they say 7, great. Deeper probing question we can ask is, okay, it's a 7. Why is it not a 5? Right? Because that gets them to justify why they've specifically picked 7, and they'll give us a bunch more information. And then we can ask on the flip side, hey, what would make it a 10? Right? They've told us what is better than a 5 and makes it a 7. And then now we want to get them to tell us what's the rest of that gap between 7 and 10. We want to surface that gap now, not let it fester and get it to the point where they ghost us or the deal slips at the end. So that's the first thing. Second, it gets them to tell us exactly what's missing versus us assuming. We never want to assume. And it gives us a roadmap for the rest of the sales process, what else they need to feel settled about this and to feel like this is a good solution. I'm going to tell you a secret. Your first tendency is going to be to avoid this question. Many reps avoid this question because we're afraid of the answer. But here's the thing. If there's doubt, it's already there. We're not going to magically create it just by asking the question, which is what I used to think whenever I was first starting. We don't create doubt by asking. We just make it visible so that we can address it. When to use this question is towards the end of discovery, after we've established the problem, the impact, and the timeline. So at this point, they should theoretically want to solve this, right? And want to solve it by a certain time. But wanting to solve it and being ready to commit to solving it are two completely different things. This is the question that bridges that gap. So here's how it sounds in real life. We walk through everything we just talked about, and then we say, okay, so let me ask you this. If we can solve the candidate visibility issue and show you a path to getting your team aligned here, scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that there's a way to move forward with this? And again, if they say 8 or 9, great. Then we ask, okay, why not a 6? So they can talk about that gap that has already been filled and made it an 8 or a 9. And then we ask, okay, cool, what would make it a 10? Right? Then we want to address that gap that still exists between it being like best solution ever. If they say 5 or 6, we don't panic. This is actually good. One of my VPs used to say, we don't have a deal until we get to friction, which didn't make sense to me until I thought about, if you're in a difficult conversation or an argument, what's the easiest thing to say to somebody? Yep, I agree. Absolutely. Totally. You're 100% right. That's the easiest thing to say. It is more difficult to push back and be like, I only agree about 50, 60%. That invites further discussion. So if they speak up and say, well, honestly, this is really more like a 5 or a 6 for us, understand that's them leaning in. They're open to discussing what the concern is or where the disconnect is. So we want to welcome that. That shouldn't be threatening to us. It doesn't feel as good as if they said 9. Right? It's still positive because they are inviting us to address the concerns that they have. Okay, let's recap. These are the 4 questions: the business impact question, the personal stakes question, the timeline reality question, and the decision confidence question. These questions are game changers, and here's why. They shift the conversation from us trying to convince someone they need to buy to someone convincing themselves that they need to change. It's a huge difference. So here's my invitation. Go to your next discovery call and try just one of these. So don't try to use all 4 of them perfectly. Just try one. See what happens. My guess is you'll notice that the conversation instantly shifts. Our buyers will start opening up in some ways that they haven't before. And that's what makes these conversations feel like conversations and consultations, not interrogations, which of course is what we're trying to avoid. So here's the other invitation. If you're an AE and you are sick of watching so many deals slip or stall or ghost, or you're stuck in that 24-ish% close rate and you want to consistently be at the top of that leaderboard and break through from being a high performer to a consistent top performer, this is exactly the kind of shift that starts to make that change. So I've helped AEs go from just constantly chasing deals to working real deals only, real deals that have a purpose, a timeline, an urgency, a personal priority. And sometimes that means the buyers end up chasing them. And this happens just by a change in the way that they ask the questions and then the questions they choose to ask. So if you're interested to understand how we might be able to apply this to your specific situation, just check out the link in the description. I work with enterprise reps who are ready to break through a plateau and start achieving at the level they know that they're capable of. Thanks so much for watching this. Go use these questions. I'd love to hear what happens.